Joining me now is Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson. She is also a Democratic gubernatorial candidate. Secretary, thank you so much for joining me. What do you make of the president's obsession with getting this bill passed, and how big of a threat would it be to free and fair elections?
Well, thank you for having me. And, we've been dealing with this rhetoric for the better part of 6 years now, ever since the president lost the 2020 election. Essentially, you have a president with deeply unpopular policies, particularly economic policies that are hurting Michiganders. They're driving up costs. And instead of trying to have a debate about how to improve people's lives, they're trying to rig elections through last-minute attempts to make it harder for citizens to vote. The good news is the federal courts and state officials are stepping in and protecting the vote, just as we have for the last 6 years and beyond. This week, Michigan became the first state to win our case to protect the private voter information of citizens in our state against attempts by the Justice Department to seize it. And I believe that if any misguided federal legislation to make it harder for citizens to vote is somehow passed, we will be able to block it in the federal courts so that we can protect the vote this fall.
So I want to dig into this a little further for our viewers so they understand. You won a big legal victory this week, and this was after, to your point, the federal court ruled the Trump administration cannot compel states to provide unredacted voter rolls. And the administration, of course, plans to appeal, arguing that these records are needed to verify voter citizenship. But is there any legit reason for states to share with the federal government voter records, which include birth dates, driver's licenses, partial Social Security numbers? Michigan conducted an elections audit, in fact, of 2024. How many potential citizenship issues were found?
Very few, infinitesimal, just as it is every time any state really looks into this question are ineligible citizens or ineligible residents voting. We find it very rare. And when it happens, we're able to catch it. The issue here is much voter file data, as you mentioned, is public. Transparency is our friend. We're very open to ensuring people have access to information so that they can verify the validity and the accuracy of our elections. What the Trump Justice Department is trying to do here is get private voting information and then not be very upfront with what they want to do with it. And we suspect it's not just to hand over to Homeland Security or other entities to harass residents and citizens here in Michigan and beyond, but it could also be used to hand over to private entities, big tech and other companies that would use it for profit. So that's what we're trying to protect against, the misuse and abuse of private voter information, knowing that for all of the needs that the president seems to profess, that public information is already available and they can get that information through legal mechanisms, as many others have already done.
Akayla, our reporter at the White House, was talking specifically about mail-in voting, according to the president, and his distrust of it. And in another ruling this week, a Massachusetts federal judge, in fact, barred the Postal Service from restricting delivery of mail-in ballots to states which don't hand over eligible voter rolls, claiming the agency does not possess the authority to regulate elections. And this came just a day after the Postmaster General told lawmakers that, the Postal Service could refuse to deliver mail ballots in states which do not turn over voter data to the federal government. Are you confident, Secretary, that that's the end of it? And if not, what can Democrats do to stop millions of eligible voters from losing access to mail-in ballots before the midterms?
Yeah, I think, no, this is not the end. What we have to recognize is this is a multi-year coordinated effort that has been going on for a long time now to try to not just interfere with our elections and confuse citizens about the validity of the process and how to vote and whether to trust the results. This is also an effort to get us to feel so exhausted of defending democracy that we give up on the concept altogether. And that's how we have to see these attempts. They are piecemeal attempts, bit by bit, to cause us to doubt the validity of our elections and the power of our own voices as voters to hold elected officials accountable. So in this case, where if the Postal Service were to deny delivery of mail-in ballots, that would be illegal. We would stop that in courts. In past elections, the Attorney General here in Michigan has actually visited with me Postal Service units to ensure that ballots are being delivered. We also have a ballot tracking mechanism here in Michigan and in many other states so that citizens can ensure their ballots, if they do return them through the mail, are tracked and received. And there are many other ways, like drop boxes, that citizens can return their ballots if they vote from home. If they don't, feel comfortable with the mail process. The bottom line is state officials have a responsibility in this moment with this ongoing attack on our elections to stand firm, follow the law, utilize the courts to protect our citizens as we've been doing successfully in Michigan. And if we do that as state officials, and if the courts protect our citizens and follow the law, democracy will prevail once again. I
don't know. The thought of you really pulling back on defending the law. Do they know Jocelyn Benson? Anyway, let's move to President Trump this week, who's canceled, of course, that bipartisan housing bill that would lower costs and boost home construction, instead demanding that Congress first pass his SAVE Act. What does it say that Trump is willing to hold a bill lowering costs for Americans, hold that bill hostage in order to get his elections bill passed?
Right. Tell me you don't care about the economic well-being of the American people without telling me, right? That's exactly what he's showing here. He doesn't care about the fact that millions of Americans are suffering under this economy and cannot afford to buy homes or afford to live in those homes. Too many Michiganders are sharing with me heartbreaking choices they have to make, literally between whether to eat and pay for medicine. And for the president to ignore those pleas and instead try to hold hostage a bill that would reduce costs in an effort to pass a misguided law that will be blocked in the courts to interfere with our elections just shows how little he actually cares about the American people and how little he actually respects the need to ensure we improve people's lives. And that also underscores why state officials are so critical in this moment, because we are the ones who are the guardrails. We stand in the brink to enforce the law, to try to improve our economy and protect our democracy. And in the presence of a president who doesn't seem to care about either of those things, it's never been more important to have governors, secretaries of state, and attorneys general protect the people of our respective states. And that's what we're doing successfully here in Michigan.
One more question about the early voting there in Michigan. It began, the Democratic primaries this week are getting underway. But that's where Democrats are holding on to a U.S. Senate seat. And they have to do it because it will be crucial to winning the majority this year. The fractious race has split Democrats along ideological lines between State Senator Mallory McMorrow, Congresswoman Haley Stevens, and progressive Abdul El-Sayed. Have you endorsed a candidate, Secretary? And how much is this race a referendum on voters' dissatisfaction with the political status quo?
I have not endorsed in this race as a candidate for governor here in Michigan for the Democratic Party. I'm focused on uniting our party on the other side of this primary so that we can win big in November with the same message that, frankly, all of us are talking about, quite frankly, which is reducing costs, whether it's ensuring health care is more affordable, housing is affordable, whether it's driving down energy costs or taking on corporate greed that too often is driving up all of these costs. You'll see Democrats united behind an effort to make Michigan an affordable state for all, to not just reduce costs, but grow our economy and protect our citizens from these abusive authority we're seeing at the federal level right now on a number of fronts. So I'm confident, as though we're in primary season right now, you'll see a lot of debate and potentially even division. But on the other side of this primary, we will be united behind an effort to ensure we're driving down costs for every Michigander and improving people's lives.
Okay, I think it's August 4. Is that the day? About 5 weeks or so from now?
August 4th, okay. Just over 5 weeks away.
Circled on the calendar, as I'm sure you do. All right, Jocelyn Benson, thank you so much for your time.